The wind howled across the endless plains of Wyoming, carrying with it the scent of rain, dust, and destiny. The sun was setting behind the rusted peaks of the Rockies, painting the sky in streaks of fire and blood. And down that lonely dirt road came a stagecoach, its wheels rattling against the dry earth, carrying a woman whose heart had already been broken before she ever stepped into the West. Her name was Clara May Dalton, 23, small-town girl, eyes like a summer storm and a soul that had seen too many winters. She clutched the letter in her hand, a letter that promised a new life. A husband, a home, a chance to start over. But when she looked down at her reflection in the cracked window of the stagecoach, she didn't see any of that. She saw the scar on her cheek that she'd tried to hide beneath her hair. She saw the faint tremor in her hands, a remnant of nights spent in cold shelters after the fire that took her family. She saw someone who didn't belong in anyone's dream. The stagecoach jolted to a stop outside Redstone Ranch, a stretch of land that went on forever and a little further still. A man waited there, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a weathered hat that shadowed eyes the color of the Wyoming sky. James Callahan, known across the county as Silent James, because words weren't his strong suit, but his honor was. He'd written for a shelter bride, as they called them, women from the East who wanted a second chance. He'd lost his fiancée to fever the year before, and ever since then, the ranch had been too quiet, too empty. His hands could tame horses, but not loneliness. When Clara stepped down from the coach, she felt every gaze of the small gathering of ranch hands and townsfolk. She wasn't what they expected. Not the pretty one the marriage agency had likely described. Her dress was plain, her shoes worn, and her eyes tired. The driver tipped his hat and left her standing there, dust swirling around her boots like ghosts of her past. James stepped forward, silent as a shadow. He looked at her, really looked, not with the judgment of men, but with the patience of someone who'd been through storms of his own. She spoke first, her voice trembling. "I'm not the pretty one you ordered." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind through the grass. Then James smiled, slow, real, and gentle. "You're all I needed," he said quietly. And something inside her, something that had been broken for years, cracked open like dry earth touched by rain. They rode back to the ranch together, the silence between them softer than words. The house stood at the edge of the land, old, wooden, and proud. Inside, everything smelled of pine and saddle soap. James showed her the kitchen, the porch, the small garden that needed tending. He spoke little, but his actions were full of care, setting down her trunk, bringing her water, showing her where the firewood was stacked. That night, Clara lay awake listening to the coyotes howl under a silver moon. Her heart was a tangled mess of gratitude and fear. Could she really belong here? Could someone like him truly want someone like her, scarred, haunted, and plain? She turned over, clutching the blanket tighter, and told herself she'd work harder than anyone ever had to earn her place. Days passed like turning pages of an old storybook. Clara learned to milk the cows, feed the chickens, and fix fences. She laughed once, just once, when a car flicked her hand. James heard it from across the yard and smiled without even realizing it. He had begun to wait for her laughter like rain after drought. But Redstone Ranch had its storms, not all from the sky. There was Ellen Wade, the town's banker's daughter, golden-haired and bitter. She had been the one everyone thought James would marry. When she saw Clara in town, dressed in a plain calico dress and worn boots, she sneered. "So that's your mail-order bride? My, James, I thought you had better taste." Clara lowered her head, cheeks burning. James turned to Ellen, his eyes steady. "Taste's got nothing to do with it," he said simply. "A heart's worth more than a pretty face." Ellen's smile faltered, and Clara felt something stir inside. Not pride exactly, but something close. One evening, rain came hard and sudden, drumming on the roof like 1,000 tiny hooves. Clara ran outside to pull in the laundry, but the wind caught one of the sheets and sent it tumbling. She chased it across the yard, laughing breathlessly, until she slipped in the mud. When she looked up, James was there, reaching for her hand. Their eyes met, and in that storm-soaked second, she saw herself reflected in him, not as broken or unwanted, but as real, alive, and worthy. He brushed a strand of wet hair from her cheek, his fingers lingering. "You work too hard," he murmured. "You deserve more than what I am," she whispered. He shook his head. "I deserve exactly who you are." And when he kissed her, softly, reverently, the world went quiet. But love on the plains is never easy. A drought hit that summer. The cattle weakened, water ran low, and James grew restless with worry. One night he snapped at Clara, not out of anger, but exhaustion. "You don't understand what it's like trying to hold everything together," he said. She flinched, hurt flashing in her eyes. "I do," she said quietly. "I've been holding myself together for years." He turned away, guilt twisting inside him. When he came back to their small cabin later, she was asleep at the table, a Bible open beneath her hand. He watched her for a long time, the woman he hadn't expected but couldn't imagine living without. By morning, he'd decided something. No matter what came, he wouldn't let go of her. And when dawn broke over the prairie, painting everything gold, he knew, sometimes, the love you never ordered is the one that saves your soul. Autumn came, sharp and beautiful, painting the hills with copper and crimson. Life on Redstone Ranch grew quieter, steadier. Clara had become part of its heartbeat. Her laughter in the mornings, her soft humming in the kitchen, the way she spoke to the horses as if they were her old friends. The scar on her cheek faded in importance. It became part of her strength, a mark of survival rather than shame. But not everyone saw it that way. One afternoon, a man rode into town asking for her, a name from her past that froze her blood cold. Thomas Weller, the drifter who had once promised her love and left her to the flames of the fire he'd caused. He had found her now, and when he saw her step out from the general store in her simple blue dress, his smile was like a snake's. Well, he drawled. "The bride of Redstone. Didn't take you long to find another fool." She backed away, her heart pounding, but before she could speak, James was there. He stepped between them, eyes hard as steel. "You've said enough," he warned. Thomas smirked. "Just thought the lady's husband ought to know what kind of past he bought." Clara trembled, shame burning through her like wildfire. But James didn't move. "Her past isn't for sale," he said. "And neither is her dignity." Thomas laughed, then swung a fist. The fight was quick and brutal, ending with Thomas sprawled in the mud and James standing over him, breathing hard. "You come near her again," he said coldly, "and you'll answer to more than me." Clara's eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but disbelief. No one had ever stood up for her before. When they got home, she tried to speak, but James simply took her hands and said, "You don't have to run anymore." From that day on, the walls between them fell completely. They began to share everything. Stories, memories, dreams. She told him about the fire, about losing her parents, about the nights she'd slept in church shelters praying for another chance. He listened, every word sinking deep. Then he told her his own truth. How he'd lost his brother in the war, how silence had become his only way to cope. They were two broken souls who had somehow fit together like missing pieces. Winter arrived fierce and early. Snow covered the ranch in silver silence. One morning, Clara woke to find James gone. He'd ridden out before dawn to help a neighbor retrieve lost cattle. Hours passed. Then the storm hit. Blinding snow, howling wind. Fear clawed at her chest. She wrapped herself in his coat and set out, heart pounding, calling his name into the white void. She found him near the frozen creek, his horse lame, his hands frostbitten, his lips pale. "James," she cried, stumbling toward him. He looked up weakly, half conscious. "Clara, you shouldn't have come." She fell beside him, tears freezing on her lashes. "I told you, I'm not leaving you," she said fiercely. With trembling arms, she helped him onto her horse and led them home through the storm. He was sick for days after, feverish, shivering. Clara never left his side. She fed him broth, wiped his brow, prayed through every night. When he finally opened his eyes, she was there, holding his hand. "You saved me," he whispered. She smiled softly. "We saved each other." Spring returned. The land healed. And so did they. On their porch, under a sky painted with sunset fire, James took her hand once more. "You still think you're not the pretty one I ordered?" he teased gently. She laughed, that sound he loved most. "I think you never ordered anyone at all." He nodded. "You're right. I just asked God for someone to walk beside me. And he sent you." The wind carried their laughter across the fields, mingling with the rustle of grass and the song of birds returning home. Redstone Ranch no longer felt empty. It was alive, with love, with hope, with the sound of a heart finally at peace. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, a voice, your storyteller's voice, could almost whisper to the audience,